digital connectivity in Africa. And then on the second part, I will delve into a more specific study I've been doing on digital inclusion in Africa, especially the role of access to electricity to enable the usage of mobile phone and internet access in rural areas and also by women. So I think that there was a general framework before the crisis, which consists in viewing access to internet as a luxury. Usually, in discussion, people say that, like even policymakers say that we first need to bring water or electricity into rural area or to the poor before thinking about access to internet. And this kind of general mindset tend to shape policy making in the connectivity or in the telecom sector. Especially in Africa, we had a complex of example of taxation, sector-specific taxation. This is being discussed. There is no one-size-fits-all policy in that area, but what is noticed is that policymakers tend to view the sector as one in which they can leverage to mobilize resource, and this has limits the capacity of the network to respond to the crisis. So, and this applies to other regions like outside Africa. I know that Africa is the focus of our discussion today. But when we take a look at how country have performed in terms of the usage of mobile internet by income level, this is very preliminary, using data from GSMA on mobile internet usage with complementary sources. We notice that it's clear that the usage of the internet has increased across most countries. We see a surge in internet usage of COVID during the outbreak, but lower middle income countries, we see lower increase in internet usage than in richer country like upper middle income country or high income countries. This is what this graph is showing, and this reflects some of the initial gap that this country have, and the outcome of policy making in the sector. And also, in terms of quality of the network, low-income countries also perform worse than the richer country, and especially in Africa. For instance, in this table, we report estimates of the change in download speed. This is that data from UCLA, speed test data. And we notice that Africa has seen the largest decline in download speed during the peak of the epidemic. Of course, the pandemic is still ongoing in Africa, but so far as of the end of May, what we have seen in terms of decline is that already in Africa, download speed has significantly decreased. So this also reflects a certain weakness in terms of the quality of the network, and this comes against the background of lower access to internet. Like by the end of last year, according to the GSMA, internet penetration was close to like 30% in Africa, the lowest among all regions in the world. But still, this is where we also see the poor quality of the network. So the challenge that uh, COVID has emphasized, especially in Africa, is really in terms of digital inclusion. The fact that so very few people have access to the internet and they are not using it. They did not really take advantage of it. They take advantage of it, but less than in other regions. And the second is about the resilience of the network. So the quality of the network is still very relatively poor, and this is reflected in a larger decline, a larger drop in download speed during the outbreak. So I was saying that in fact Africa entered the crisis with a number with these two gap, like access gap and the quality gap. But there is also other structural factor that really explain this beyond policy making. So access to electricity is one, because in other parts of the world, we often take access to electricity for granted. But in Africa, we still have like close to 60% of the population does not have access to electricity. And if we just consider the rate of progress over the past decade, like it was close to 1% increase in the rate of access to electricity per year. So it will take us like up to at least 50 years, 50 more years in order to to reach universal access to electricity. Something that is taken for granted in most part of the world, Asia or Latin America, even the poorest, they have access to electricity. So this is one of the constraints to the use of connectivity in Africa. And through this presentation, I will provide empirical evidence to support that. And the first one is this table here. This is the main result of an econometric study we have done using macro data, data at the country level about mobile penetration rate, internet penetration rate, both smartphone and mobile internet penetration rate, and also internet usage. So what we have seen is that in Africa, and so this cover 30, like up to close to 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa over the period from 2000 to 2016 to be updated. And when measuring mobile telephony access, we restrict ourselves to the period of from 2000 to 2009, when mobile internet start being available. So what we observe is that in fact mobile penetration rate or mobile telephony was adopted despite low access to the internet. The main driver was really income. So as you can see in this table, the coefficient of GDP per capita that we use for as a proxy for income is positive and significant. In both these two columns, this is the whole sample, and the second column is without South Africa, because South Africa introduced mobile internet a little bit before 2019. So what you observe is that the main driver of mobile connectivity during that period was really the growth in income. But when it comes to internet access, it turns out that income is no longer it's positive but not significant. The key variable that are significant here are access to electricity and literacy. So access to electricity has a significant impact on smartphone penetration, and the literacy rate measured by the percentage of people individuals that can read and write is positive and significantly correlated with mobile internet assets, so the penetration rate of mobile internet. So this tells us that, in fact, the story will be different for internet access. We cannot do it without access to electricity because of smartphone. The consumption, power consumption of smartphone is much higher than with the feature or dumb phone. So we cannot do without it. But however, there are some there are some question about whether it is because you don't provide access to electricity just for internet usage, but what has been observed is that usually providing internet as access to electricity in rural areas is not sufficient to ensure that rural households are actually using the service. So that brings me to the next slide, and actually the second part of my presentation, because I want to delve into the impact of access to electricity using data from microdata at this time from Senegal, because in the previous slide, the macro data, this is at the country level, so we are not able to really investigate the impact at the micro level, which really, especially in the rural area, where the issue is much more critical. So we focus on Senegal using micro level data. We have I will describe the data later on, but this is a very unique set of data on the usage of mobile telephony and internet at the level of each individual, and I will discuss how we handle that data later on. So in fact, there have been a lot of a number of studies that investigate the driver of digital connectivity. Potential driver include like income, as I showed, the rate of globalization, regulation, and competition policy, especially when it comes to a new generation of mobile telecommunication, and also the role of education and content quality. But this is a study done in OECD country. We also have a study by Lukash and co-authors on how access to infrastructure affect the use of mobile money, which is also a version or a variant of the use of mobile connectivity. One of the studies that really look into the impact of access to electricity is the one by Ahmed Osman, and they consider they investigate the impact of access to electricity in low-income countries. So this is a sample of they have a sample of several countries across the world, including up to 20 or some in sub-Saharan Africa. But this is a study that is very similar to the one that I presented here, although in this table, although they focus much more on internet access, whereas in the previous one, we not only look at the impact on smartphone ownership, but also the impact on mobile telephone, in order really to highlight what really changed, how policy making should really change when we switch from mobile internet, mobile telephony to mobile internet. But so what I was saying is that the impact of access to electricity in rural area in particular on connectivity is unclear, and this is because many studies have documented that usually when you provide or you bring the electricity grid or even decentralized power solution into rural area, the uptake is very low. And it has to do with affordability, because to have access to electricity is one, but being able to use it is another concern, especially in rural area. So the cost of installation of equipment that go with access to electricity is one of the reasons, and so generally the uptake is very low. So that in fact it's really unclear how providing access to electricity in rural area will support increased usage of connectivity, and this has a lot of implications both for policymakers, but also for telecom operators that are seeking to expand into rural areas, and also that are thinking about energy solution for the tower in rural areas. So in this paper, in this second part of my presentation, I will report the result of a study we did in Senegal using very granular data, mobile phone metadata. These are data that the data set from 2013. We have more recent data, but I will present the result for the 2013 data, and the other one is work in progress. So this data provide information about the time, the location, usage, and device characteristic of both parties that are involved in the communication, in a call typically. So we know whether the caller is using a smartphone or not, so that we can derive the potential to use the internet, but also we know the volume of communication, like that's the minutes of call, the number of times they call, and also we have the same information on text message. Just to mention that these are data that were provided by the telecom operator Orange. I was previously working with Orange, or at Orange actually, and so this study has been co-authored with previous colleague of mine at Orange. So this data was provided by Orange from Senegal 2013 with this very detailed level of information. So we're using this information to estimate the usage and smartphone penetration at the antenna level, actually at the site level, because on each site we have several antennas. So we aggregate this information that we have at the site level. And we also have information about the power source of the telecom site. So whether the site is connected to the grid or not. Whenever a grid is available in a particular area, the telecom operator typically connects the tower with the grid. But sometimes they may add some generator or solar panel just for resilience in case of power cuts. But whenever there is a power grid, we know that power is available in that area. Other sites that are not connected to the grid, they typically rely on a solar panel or electric generator. So in that case, we know that electricity is not available in that area, because otherwise the telecom operator will necessarily connect the tower with the grid first in the first place. So this will be our measure of our proxy for the availability of electricity in a particular area that is in the vicinity of the site. And we complement this data with household survey data that is a bit antecedent, or that predates the mobile, the CDR, the core detailed record data. And this is a household survey which provides information about access to electricity and digital connectivity at the household level. In this survey, electricity, this is just a domain variable which says whether the household has access to electricity or not. And we are able to disentangle between access to electricity for informal connection, that is from the neighbor, and those households who subscribe to an official media provider. And finally, we also have a census data. This census data is from 2013, which provides information about the socio-demographic characteristics of municipalities. And this will be very useful because in the mobile call, in the CDR data, the metadata, we don't have the demographics of the users. So we will use the census data in order to proxy or to estimate the socio-demographic characteristic of the user around the site. And one thing I need to mention is that we are using mobile phone data, so individual that use that use mobile phone in a particular area, they can be mobile. That is, they can use it from they can use an individual can use several sites for connectivity because they are mobile. So what we did is that we were able to track the usage of the antenna that serve a particular individual throughout the whole year, because we have the data it's actually weekly data, so we know each week which site serve a particular individual. So we know that throughout the whole year, so that we are able to identify where a particular individual, what is the most plausible area of residence of a particular individual. So those who frequently those who are frequently served by a particular site, they are considered as residents of in that area. So this is the way in which we are able to aggregate or to compute the usage of mobile connectivity by individuals living in a particular area. So we disconnect, we try to disconnect the mobility aspect of the network from the characteristic of individual living in a particular area. That is the way in which we are able to match the data from the census and the data from the mobile CDR.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
About the data. So if you could just go back to the previous slide. So you have data from mobile operator, the first one. For how many people? Is it for people or?
Oh yes, it's the data is for all the subscriber of Orange.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I see. And then the survey data, it says it's 17,000 households and 168,000 individuals. So these individuals are from these households, or?
Yeah, they are from this household. Yes.
And there are like almost 10 people per household. It's
yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Oh, I see. And this comes also from 1 year only.
Yes, 1 year. Yeah.
All right, and so for these people, do you also know the location in terms of geolocation, or more like?
No, no, we don't know that. In fact, the household data will be used to make a separate assessment of the impact of electricity, access to electricity on connectivity, because we have both information in the household data. But the limitation of the household data is that we only have the information about subscription to a mobile telephone service and the expenditure. We only have these two. We don't have the information about the actual usage of the phone, and also more importantly, the information about the flow of communication in and out the household. So the CDR data is useful in the sense that we have this additional information, and we also know who is using a smartphone or not.
All right. Thanks.
So in fact, we will merge the mobile phone data with the census data, and to do the analysis. So the census data actually provide the socio demographic characteristic for the mobile phone data, and the household data will be used separately to complement the analysis.
Right. And the merging of this database is based on what variable, some code for geography?
Oh yeah, it's at the municipality level.
All right.
Yeah, from the census data, we have the information at the municipality level. So we match, and we know the municipality of the site. So we match it with, we merge it with the census data at the municipality.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I see some in the chat. All right, so yeah, just to give you a quick overview of how electricity and mobile phone coverage map in Senegal. So what we see here is that I hope you can see the chart very well. So we have population density. Mobile tower is the dot, and the energy transmission network. So what we see is that in fact, in a high population density area, that is urban area, the distribution, the spatial distribution of mobile tower is pretty much aligned with the energy transmission network. So it's only in a rural area that we see a potential for some variation. We see variation in the availability of the electricity grid uh, and the in fact, it's typically in rural area, so in the low density area, that we see variation in access to electricity. That's number one. Number two is that in fact we also see this graph shows that in fact whether electricity is available or not, we have full coverage, like a very broad coverage of mobile phone, and this is per the regulation with the mobile license. So this provides us with which will provide us with a very nice variation in access to electricity, holding availability of connectivity constant. So we have mobile phone available everywhere, but in some area there is electricity, in others we don't have electricity. So so that we can identify how the availability of electricity affect the usage of mobile phone. So on this graph, this is just to show the correlation, the spatial correlation, actually just the basic correlation of access to electricity and internet usage proxy by your smartphone penetration rate. So we can see that in fact the intensity of the color is very much correlated. It's greener where it's getting more red. So this provides the first thing about our result. So just I hope you can read this table, but I will just focus on give a high-level message and switch to the actual estimate. So in fact, this is a descriptive statistic. Some descriptive, these are some descriptive statistics of the data just presented. In the first two panels, like here and there, you have the summary statistical data from the mobile phone data, and the last panel is about the socio-demographic characteristic of the municipality from the census data. So what we say is that in fact, not surprisingly, we don't have any variation in access to electricity in urban area. So it's basically in rural area that we see mobile sites with access to electricity and not. And in fact, we already see the difference in terms of smartphone usage between those areas with access to electricity and without. And also in terms of the usage of mobile phone, the minutes of outgoing call, the number of SMS, these are pretty much higher in those in area connected to electricity compared to the one without access to electricity. So we can also see that in fact the characteristic of those areas is very different. In terms of access to basic infrastructure like electricity, but also water, or in terms of the living standard of the household, like those who own a television, for instance, which is of course very much correlated with access to electricity, and the percentage of literate where access to electricity. So basically, in fact, the living standard is much higher in area with access to electricity than area without. So we want to control for that. So this is what we did in using a simple linear regression of the mobile usage on electricity controlling for the characteristic I just showed. And we did this using data from up to 600 sites in rural areas. So we basically see that in fact, access to electricity come with higher usage of mobile connectivity. The coefficients are all positive and significant after controlling for those for the characteristics, the socio-demographic characteristics for the municipalities. But however, we know that despite this control, there may still be some omitted variable bias because they not only omitted variable bias, but also simultaneity in access to electricity and the availability of mobile phones. So in terms of quality, for instance, the quality of the mobile network may be higher where electricity is available, and also in terms of the characteristic of the municipality, we want to control for that. This is why we have run a nearest neighbor matching approach, and this consists in matching rural sites with access to electricity with sites that are not connected to the grid. So we have identified close to 90 rural sites that we match with 33 based on the characteristic of the household in those in the municipality where those sites are located. So what we saw is the following. So is the outcome is in this the outcome of the matching is in this table. So actually you can just check the p-value, which show the comparison of the characteristic between the match and the like the treated and the untreated site. So it's above the 5%. So which say that we have a good match. So the outcome of this this matching is presented in this table. So what we see is a positive impact. So we confirm the positive impact on the usage of smartphone. So municipality or sites connected to grid, or actually individual living in municipality with access to electricity, they have 3 percentage points higher usage of smartphone ownership than those in areas that are not connected. But however, contrary to what we saw with the OLS estimate, by matching, we really noticed that in terms of usage of mobile phone, we don't see any impact. Like impact is the difference is positive, but not statistically significant. And we have some significant results on SMS, but this may be due to the fact that, in fact, this may reflect some affordability issue because SMS is much cheaper. So maybe they rely more on SMS instead of making a call. But the most interesting result here is really the impact on incoming call. So it seems that because we have positive and significant difference in terms of incoming, the volume of incoming call and SMS, both from the whole country, but also from specific cities such as Dakar, which is the capital city of Senegal. So we notice that, in fact, individuals that are connected to electricity in rural area, they receive more call, especially from the capital city, than those who are not connected. So which somehow reflect the increased availability of those individuals to increase connectivity of those individuals. But surprisingly, we were expecting them to make more call, but it's actually the reverse. They receive more call instead of making. So I'm running a bit out of time, so I will just jump into the latest, the last result, which is here. Yes. So in fact, because we noticed that individual people that are connected to electricity, they receive more call. They are more connected to other users in urban area. So what we did was to compare how we are comparing how the increase in incoming call differ from, like, is affected by the living standard of the originating area. Like someone that is being in rural area with access to electricity see an increase in incoming calls or SMS. We want to check where these calls are coming from, whether they are coming from richer cities or whether the living standard of the originating city is not relevant. So what we see is that, and this is what is provided here. I think I can share the draft paper later on for more detail about the methodology. But basically, what you observe is that, in fact, it's really about the living standard of the originating area. So the increase in incoming call result from more call coming from richer, like area with higher living standard. So living standard here measured by the household assets as well as the level of literacy or access to basic infrastructure in that area. So this is why we see a positive impact here, so on the duration of the call, but also on SMS received as well. And finally, let me just conclude from here, just to leave you with some remarks. What we have learned from this study is really the fact that despite the skepticism about how access to electricity can affect connectivity in rural area, we know for sure that electricity is important for internet access. We know, so this is not really new. But what is really new here is the fact that in rural area, it's really matter. And it's important because often access to electricity is designed without having in mind often the potential use in terms of connectivity, how the user will value connectivity. So being able to show that, in fact, access to electricity can support connectivity in rural area through higher ownership of smartphone or increased usage from urban area, increased incoming calls. This then support to the hypothesis that, in fact, access to electricity and connectivity complement each other in rural area, and these open opportunities for issue topics like infrastructure sharing, for instance, because for the network operator, it's interesting to expect that access to electricity will increase usage, because that can support infrastructure sharing in those areas, like between, not only between operator, but also between operator and infrastructure, like so using those programs to deploy network will make sense in those rural areas, so that access to electricity and access to that connectivity can be provided at the same time, and to increase connectivity in rural areas with those accessibility. And the opportunity for development in those rural areas, I did not mention the estimates on the on the last result I just showed, is that, in fact, there is increased integration between rural area, typically poor, and urban area, especially those that have a higher living standard. And this is very important for policy making, because it means that, especially in this time of crisis, in fact, enabling connectivity in rural area, typically through access to electricity, is good for transfer of both knowledge, for instance, transfer of money in time of crisis, for instance. So there is really potential to support development if enabling connectivity in rural area can really help connect those rural area with the urban area, especially those that have higher living standard. So this study is based on the cross-sectional data, which has some limitation in terms of identification strategy, and also even in terms of how we interpret the result. But we are complementing this study with a longitudinal analysis using data from both 2013 and 2015. This is in progress, and we have preliminary results. I can confirm that the result that we have pretty much in line with the one that I just discussed here. And I think another area of research will be really to take advantage of the distribution of solar home systems, so decentralized power solution across rural area in Africa in order to do some RCT to really assess how access to electricity impact connectivity in those areas. So let me stop here, and we hope we still have some time to discuss. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, George. We have some time to ask questions. Are there any questions you want to ask?
Mine is really a little bit more of a comment, but just because I also have to dash on to another call. George, thank you very much for that presentation. I just wanted to alert you to the nationally representative data from the After Access survey that we did in 2019 in Senegal. This is Research ICT Africa. And
Okay.
It was a sample of about only 2,000, so it doesn't work off your census household data, but it is drawn, the sample is drawn with a very lean and effective method that we've adapted over nearly 2 decades now from the World Health Organization, that allows it to at least be nationally representative with that kind of sample, although it's not representative at the district level, which is often what the census office wants in order to collaborate formally. But we do work off their census, off the census frame which they provide, and then randomly select our sample, our enumerator areas, and then randomly select households in the enumerator areas, and then randomly select the individuals. So it is pretty robust, but only at the national level. And so there is really very comprehensive individual mobile ownership and internet access, smartphone data. There's quite detailed breakdown of household assets and reasonably detailed breakdown of electricity, whether it's off the main grid, which is obviously a big problem in many of the countries we look at, but also if there's solar or battery or whatever else is required. So there's really a valuable amount of information in there that I think would be able to enhance your very creative use of the data, the finding data sources in the absence of our having them. I know the World Bank has recently been using this data of ours for their study in Senegal. And I just wanted to comment that, very broadly, and I'm not sure if Matobi is actually on this call, but Matobi, who's been leading this survey analysis for us, was, we also find that this, because it is nationally representative, we are able to model the data, and it does provide quite different, findings from the simply, descriptive statistics that we're getting from much of the international data sets or International Telecommunications Union or World Bank data sets, which are often the same basis anyway and supply side provided. So even where we have, obviously it is quite different in different countries, but even where we have very high mobile coverage, so up to 90% and more mobile coverage, and even where we have electricity coverage of, as in South Africa, quite relatively high. And even in those countries where there's relative, lower levels of electricity penetration, but sufficient for there to be quite, reasonably high levels of coverage, we're still seeing these very, very low penetration rates. And so, what the modeling suggests is that obviously these electricity and things are preconditions, but actually the drivers of uptake are, it is education and obviously correlated factors of income, etc. So that even if you have the infrastructure there for educational purposes, etc., you're still not going to get people online until you've addressed some of those human development demand side challenges.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think this is this was not the illiteracy part. Um, I did not really highlight it, but what it's pretty much what you just said. Pretty much aligned with some of the observation we made from from the descriptive analysis. We also noticed that in fact electricity is key to get people like connected, like have a smartphone, for instance. But when it comes to the actual usage of the internet, uh, literacy, literacy rate really matter. It's really important. And actually, electricity is no longer important for the usage. And this is what one of the findings from this analysis. Thank you for that. And I saw the link you provided in the mail. Thank you for that. I will have a look and perhaps reach out for further discussion, because I think this is very interesting. And you were aware that we are doing the World Development Report for 2021 is about data, digital data, and as part of this report, we are also investigating what are the barriers to internet usage, and using this up-to-date data would be very interesting to highlight. I know that some of my colleagues are using actually a previous wave of the after access survey to do the analysis, but it will be interesting to have much more recent. Thank you so much.
Sorry, if I could, Lucas, just add that data set is available on, it's curated by Data First. So the data set is available. I know there are different parts of the bank that don't always talk to each other. So if you don't have access to the whole data set, it is publicly available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If there are any other questions, feel free to ask. If not, then I will also ask a question. So, as I understand, the regressions are then done for municipalities, right, or regions, and there are like in total 150 of them, 150 or something like this. What is the number of observations at the end that you use?
In the matching process, we have a total of 140 observation, and almost 100 for the treaty, like with access to electricity, and 30 free without access to electricity.
Right. So my question is like, so the objective is to do this propensity matching in order to go around of the problem of endogeneity, right? In a way.
Yes, yes, and also because we don't have the longitudinal data, we only have cross section, so this is why we're doing the propensity.
Right. With that respect, I mean, my question is because you try to match this 90 regions that are treated, right, and whatever number non-treated. But still, would they be like, there would be like totally different regions in a way? I mean, obviously because electricity and other factors like economic development, they are concentrated in some regions and other regions are still not very well developed. So you think you are able to really go around the problem of endogeneity in this way?
So first of all, in fact, this 140 were selected from a set of 400 municipalities. So there were some municipalities for which we didn't find a match. So we discarded. So those municipalities were very different from any other without access to electricity. So the 90 municipalities we're using, they are the one for which we found a match. And this is the limitation of propensity of PSM. We only match based on observable characteristics. There may be some unobservable characteristics that still influence the data, but we didn't think of any beyond the living standard, proxy for living standard we have, and also proxy for access to basic infrastructure, such as water, for instance. So, but on the basis of those observable variable characteristics, we show statistically that there is no significant difference between the the connected and the unconnected municipality. So we have a high certain degree of confidence in this matching under the reservation that subject to potential non-observable characteristics that we didn't include in the matching process.
Right. Another question. Maybe it's also possible to use the full sample of individuals and do some estimations using individual level data. But in this case, as I understand, some variables that would come on the level of municipality, right? So like, I don't know, like,
yes, yes.
Maybe it's kind of repetitive in a sense that the same value would be for a large number of individuals from the same municipality. Yeah. But still, I think this is something that generally people do, that some variables may be individual level, some variables may be regional level. And as I understand, you have
yeah, because in fact, if the access to electricity variable was at the individual level, that would be fine. So we can regress usage at the individual level with access to electricity at the individual level, and then control for individual characteristic using the municipality characteristic as a proxy.
Right, exactly.
But here the issue is that even the access to electricity is not at the individual level. So all the left-hand side or the right-hand side variable, they are at the municipality level. So it will be the same. Like even if we use individual level data, we will have the same estimate. Like the coefficient will just be the same as if we aggregate the individual level data at the municipality level.
Right. Okay. And okay, the final question from my side. So if I recall, you show that electricity doesn't have positive impact on mobile phone adoption, on cell phone adoption, but it has on internet usage, right? So I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think I saw that the coefficient wasn't
the other way around. It has impact on smartphone adoption, positive impact on smartphone adoption, but not on the usage.
All right, I see. Okay.
It's on the usage, and that's what I was referring to. What we observe is that on usage, it's rather the level of education that influence the usage.
All right. Okay, I see. Just a final question. So the internet, Senegal has quite high share of fixed broadband, right, relative to other countries.
Yeah.
And the internet usage here you have in mind is based on mobile, or it's both fixed and mobile?
It's mobile only.
Okay.
It's mobile only, and because in fact we are focusing on rural area where fixed internet access is just like very limited. So it makes sense to focus only on mobile in rural area.
All right. Okay, so these are all questions from my side. I don't know if anybody else wants to ask something. All right. If not, thank you very much, George, for finding your time in the early morning.
Thank you.
To give the seminar.
Yeah, it's a nice way to wake up in DC. So thank you all for your attention.
Hope to be in touch with respect to some projects that we're doing or others will be doing for South Africa or Africa. And yeah, we're looking forward for more papers of yours.
Yeah, that would be great. And yeah, thanks for the comment. Thanks for the opportunity. I look forward to more opportunity like this, like just conversation to learn about what we are doing. And maybe I didn't have the time to provide you a bigger picture of what we are doing at the IFC or with other colleagues in the bank group, but also learn a bit about what you are doing. I think we usually organize internal No, seminar is not. These are not research seminar per se, but this is just a kind of platform to discuss with external stakeholders about what they're doing, and also talk a bit about what we are also doing in internet, just to share knowledge. So perhaps we can organize something like that at some point, in order to have a much broader, like higher level conversation. And yeah. So I will revert, and I look forward to any paper, any research that may be of interest. You know, we are working on the telecom sector. We have interest in a variety of topics: infrastructure sharing, the issue of affordability, like how to close the digital divide, especially in rural areas. So any analytical piece in that area, especially in Africa, would be of a valuable contribution to our work. So please feel free to share, and I look forward to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much again. We'll be happy to do this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Thanks.